Welcome to Swashbuckling with Code. I am Jimmy Cleveland, and in today's episode, we're going to add styled components to our Gatsby project. Now, I'm going to use the emotion variant of styled components, as I think that it has the most documentation written around it in the Gatsby docs, and most of the Gatsby users I see seem to have kind of settled on that, but there are also other alternatives to it. But once you learn one, you can really switch pretty seamlessly between the others. So, don't worry about that. So I'm also going to show gatsby-plugin-emotion and why you need it, if you want it, actually, and what it does. Because for the longest time, I just installed it as the Gatsby docs recommended it, and I didn't really understand exactly what it did differently, and now I have a better understanding of that, so I'm going to go through that a little bit. So just a brief note on styled components. What they are is a modern way to do styling in mostly modern JavaScript frameworks. And they allow you to essentially just take variables in your code and use them directly in your CSS. Now, there's obviously CSS variables, as a standard feature now in the CSS spec, but this is a little bit different as it allows you to react to state changes really cleanly and just kind of pass that information along and directly affect your CSS in a pretty cool and I think logical way for React. It all just kind of jives together. So I think it'll make more sense if we just get to it. Now, if you will recall, we left off with this footer that we had created down here, and this actually puts us in a really good position to start working with styled components since we have our first, type of reusable component in the system. So normally I would go to the Gatsby docs and look up how to install this here if I were starting out. But I'm actually going to show you, if you go to the emotion docs, how to install that so that you can know the difference between the things that you need to install for Gatsby versus just emotion in a regular React project or any JavaScript project really, but we're particularly focused on React. So we'll scroll down here and you can see that you can just install this emotion core. Now, I will restart the server and yarn add that. But if you scroll down a little bit more, there's actually a couple different ways to use the syntax for emotion. And to get the other one, you need to also have this emotion styled package. Okay, so we'll restart the server. And jump back over to our code. And so here we have this footer, and the footer is being styled by this class and these global styles, okay? And if we look back at our browser, open that up, you will see that there, in this instance, we're not serving yet, so it's a little bit different in development versus build, but there is this style sheet request for this right now. Okay, so we're going to start out with one form. There's a couple different ways to write the syntax. But the first one here is going to be, let's say we can call this styled footer. This is just kind of a temp name for now. And then you can say, well, I want a styled dot footer for that. And how you get that is if you come down here, you can see there's this import styled from emotion styled. Whoops. Oh, I didn't know you could paste in here. That's cool. That's funny. Never even recognized that. All right. And yep, there you go. So there's your styled. And then the syntax for this is going to be pretty interesting. Might be a little weird. Just bear with me. So you're going to do these double backticks. So we're going to open up a string. And then we're going to use the template literal syntax to start writing our styles like regular CSS. So this is kind of cool. So if you do background color, red or whatever, we'll just start like this. And then I'm actually going to delete this whole class name here, and then I'm going to change the footer tag to be styled footer. That's pretty interesting, right? So we used to have footer HTML, and now what we're doing is when we do the style.footer, we're saying make me a footer tag and then store it here, these styles, all right? And if we go back over to the browser, you can see we have this tiny little red one. So if we just wanted our styles back, we would just take this whole footer class, grab everything inside of that, and then come down here and just put that there. And actually, let me get rid of the whole footer real quick. Yeah, Butterfingers this morning. Okay, so there you go. We've got all our styles back. Pretty cool, right? It's pretty simple. So the interesting thing about this is that we don't have a class on this anymore. So you might be wondering, how does it know how to associate these styles? Well, if you take a look here, it's actually pretty cool. Down here, there is a footer, and this footer itself has this interesting little CSS hyphen and then this little identifier that it's created. So it's actually creating this based on the styles. It's going to be a unique identifier for each set, and that is pretty interesting. So what this does is it makes it to where you have this kind of reliable scope to house other styles within, just like a class would be, but it will just go ahead and take care of creating that for you. Now the styles themselves, as of right now, will be you'll look for these style tags for data-emotion, and when you see that, you can see that it will have, let's see if this is the one, 1E9 and ending in 8.1. That's not it. Oh, this background red. It hasn't gotten rid of that yet, probably because we're in dev mode. And then this one. Yep, 8.1. Okay, so that's how you do that, and I'll show you how it looks with the built code, so you can kind of see how it actually ends up. But first, let's try the other variation, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the other variation here is to use this pragma here, is what they suggest. So if we were to just take these two, and I'll let you read this, it might be a little bit difficult, so I'll highlight it. So this comment tells Babel to convert JSX to calls to a function called JSX instead of React create element. So you can probably see it a little bit better up here. So this is a pragma, and we'll move these down below. I just like to have that at the top there. And what this pragma itself is doing is this part right here, sorry, is the pragma at JSX. And this is sort of like a declaration for whatever is compiling your code or transpiling code in this instance to say, hey, for this file, I want you to behave a little bit differently. I've got some different rules for you. And in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to allow us to, let's come back down here, to use this CSS prop here with this CSS that we've imported variable, okay? Just like so. So CSS prop, and then this. So this might be pretty weird to you, but all you really need to do with this is the exact same thing, but you do not need this component now. So this one, you can just make it a footer tag like usual, and then we can come down here and save this. We'll just leave that. We're not using it right now. And we should have the same result, unless I did something silly, which does happen from time to time. I'll reload just to make sure. And you can see we have the same result. Okay, so the CSS prop allows us to use this CSS tag here. And I just want to briefly touch on some of the pros and cons. Not only do people debate a lot about whether they like or dislike CSS and JS, but they also have a lot of opinions about how they use it. Like these two ways are very contrasting. One the CSS prop way, one the style tag way. And the world's just learning, really. This is a cool new idea, and I'm going to show you a little bit more features about it in just a second. But I just wanted to mention that everyone kind of has their own opinions about it. It's been growing a lot. It's been getting cooler and cooler. It's gained a lot of ground and traction. And, you know, I don't think it's going anywhere, honestly. I think it's pretty cool, and there are definitely pros and cons like most things. And, you know, you just have to weather the storm, so to speak. Like it's worth trying out for the power that it affords you, which I'm going to show you some of that. But even if you don't end up using it, or it becomes, you know, people worry a lot about whether their skills are, you know, the things they're spending time and learning are not going to be valuable in a year or 2 years, and they get this fatigue, like JavaScript framework fatigue and all that. But all of these things are making you a better developer if you can put the time in. They will let you experience different ways of doing things and kind of open your mind to new ways as you grow and grow as a developer, and you'll be able to, come up with interesting solutions when you've seen the way that other people have come up with tools or just different design patterns and all that. So I really encourage you to just try new tech out every now and then. You don't have to, but if you're interested at all, don't worry about, whether it's going to be around or not for however long, unless you're in like a big scale project and you want to add it or not. Then you have to do some, decision making. But, on your own for your side projects, for small projects, yeah, try it out. Okay. End rant there. Let's get back into some of the cool stuff. So I will revert this real quick, but just know that, yeah, you can do it this way. And actually, you can do it one more way that you don't need the Pragma for, I believe. You can actually just do, oops, we want another set of braces in here. Okay, just make that look a little more normal. You can actually use just object syntax for these. And so this case, you'll see that, oops, YSW, you are having to pass a string here, and you need to use the JavaScript notation for the style, not the background hyphen or background hyphen color or whatever. I guess I could just do background. It's not a good comparison, but if I were to do background color here, that's a better comparison. So that is, this is kind of a knee-jerk reaction a lot of people have to style components in general when they first see it, is like, I don't want to write my styles in objects. And I strongly felt that way at first, but I'm actually okay with both ways now. It depends. I do prefer the standard CSS way, and just like, to write regular CSS. In this case, you can actually do Sass. But I've heard some arguments about performance optimizations, being able to parse and get rid of dead code and all that stuff for the object syntax. And some people just like it for other reasons, just because you can just use variables directly here. You could just use a woof variable and color it if you had that and all that stuff. But, pick your battles. Okay, so we're going to dial back all the way back to footer, and I want to get rid of that. See, why are we in an infinite loop? That was very interesting. What did I do there? Okay. So now we're back to styled footer. Let's make sure we're loading. Boom, that's good. Now check this out. Let's say that our footer, we wanted to make it to where it can receive a prop to change the color. So I'm going to say light in this instance. It's not the greatest name, but bear with me for this demo. So it takes a light prop, and then I'm just going to pass light right on along. Okay, and that's it. But what I can do now, this is going to be weird if you've never seen this before, is now I can say, all right, well, this background right here, let's do it underneath. Now I want my background. And we could do background color. And I'm going to start writing some JavaScript. And then when I start writing JavaScript in the middle of this, template literal here, we're given a callback function. And so that you can start a function here, and you can receive your props, kind of like just calling a component. And then that props, I can read props.light here. Okay. Now, actually we'll leave it light, but pretend it was color, because a better example here would be like, okay, what if the default for this is, we'll go back to red. And now I'm saying, hey, I want the background color to read from my props and set it to whatever the light prop is. You can see it's red, right? It's pretty cool. Now, what's really sweet about this is a component, and it's meant to be reused. So you could pass in light as another color. Let's say peach puff. Can't type. So if we were to say peach puff and pass that in, it doesn't have a default now. It's going to switch, or I should say it's not using the default. So each instance of the footer can be used a little bit differently. But let me show you a little more practical example here. So let's go all the way back here. So let's say we don't have a default. I'm just going to leave it undefined. So I want to say, okay, if, I shouldn't say it's more practical. It's not really more practical. It's just for this instance. Let's say I want a, when the light value is passed in, because we currently have a dark footer. When the light value is passed in, I actually want to use the color old lace or something like that. Otherwise, I want to use this color right here. I gotta put my pound there. So we're just using a ternary to have a nice little simple statement here and say, okay, is it light? So in this case, it's not, but what if this footer were to say tack on the light attribute? And if you ever just pass a attribute here and don't write, equals or set it to anything, it'll just be flagged as true automatically. And now you can see we look like we don't have a footer. But what we can do is say, all right, well, if I want to do the same thing with my color now, and I'll just type it out so you can see it again. So you got to do this and props, and then you're going to send it through. And in this case, we want to say props.light. And if it is a light background, this is where it's not a great name because it's like light foreground or background. But, the whole footer being dark, bear with me. So if it's light, actually, what we'll do is we'll copy the background color here. And okay. And then here, we'll just do the color to be this color that it was before. Sorry, my brain went away there for a moment. All right. So now you have this. So imagine that you might have a dark colored background on certain templates or something like that. And you want to use a light colored footer. Now all you have to do is pass in that prop. And then if I remove that prop, then it'll go back. That's pretty cool, huh? So you get a lot of interesting power by using this format, using styled components or CSS and JS. Okay, so let's take a look real quick. Yeah, we're not using this right now anymore, so I can just get rid of this. Let's take a look at the built version of that. I think this is kind of important. The first thing I want you to notice, keep your eye on, I already pointed it out, but I want to show it again. Notice this class right here, and then you can see like the styles. If we want to take a look at the styles, you can see that it's just been injecting them as we've been going, but it'll take you up to this little minified style tag, and that's pretty nice. But I just want you to keep an eye on that in dev mode because you're going to see a cool thing after I show this. So we want to do yarn serve in this instance. Okay. And we will go to 9,000 now instead. And so now we are hosted. And this is kind of interesting because what you're going to see is that, well, actually, I'll search for emotion to show you. Okay, so in the head now, you have this style data emotion, and then you have this U67AZJ. All right. And if we go to try to find the footer and inspect that, we will see that it matches that. Okay, U6AZJ. And then if you do to view source, and I actually should have showed you this on the dev first, but if we bump this up, you can see that we are getting our initial payload, the document, has the styles in it. So let's look up. It looks like it's there at the top. Yeah. Align. What is it? Content. Align items. Okay. I think it'll actually be easier just to show this. Well, it'll be easier to show it by just curling it and dumping it. But sometimes view source, just so you know, is a little bit finicky because Chrome is either caching or something like that. I'm not actually sure, but it won't always give you the full payload unless it's like your first time hitting it from an incognito browser. So let's actually take the URL here. and go over to our terminal. And then what we'll do is we'll say curl this and output it to some sort of, page.html, doesn't matter. Code, open up that page.html just so I can view it regularly. And, oh, see how we got redirected. Let's redo that. We need to go to trailing slash to get a redirect here. And then go back to that. There we go. So it looks like it already formatted it. Oh, no, it didn't. Okay. It just has, for some reason, it has some formatting already. It's not entirely minified. That's weird. So here you can see our import of our font and our styles here. And then you'll scroll down here. This is our global styles. And if we were to search for emotion, you'll see here it is above the footer, right above it. That's pretty interesting, right? It's going to make a style tag right above it. So that's kind of cool. And then also notice that there are these WebKit prefixes. So these vendor prefixes here. And that is because Emotion is going to automatically put those in so that you have some backwards compatibility. Now, this is generally a good thing. It's really nice. Normally, this is something you have to set up in your toolchain, and you're just kind of getting it out of the box, which is really sweet. It's, however, kind of a debatable thing. I usually just leave them in, but you could argue that it might be adding bloat if you have a lot of styles. So imagine that you do not support IE11. And IE11 just happens to not support some of the features you're using and you just don't care about it. Well, you'd be getting these vendor prefixes along anyways, even if that really was the only browser that didn't support them. Usually they're pretty good about it, but even if it's in I've seen it in the 90% of global browser usage, they'll still have these here. So it's nice because you do want to start all inclusive. You don't want a nasty surprise where you're using some sort of CSS that isn't allowed. But I believe you could probably use the plugin to enable or disable this. I've never tried it, but just know that that's there. And it's kind of cool that it comes with it out of the box, in my opinion. So, and then the fact that the style tag is above the footer. So just showing that you are getting the server-side rendering just right away. You don't even need any sort of Gatsby plugin or anything like that. It's coming with it because when we curl it, that's going to be, what the initial document looks like for everyone before JavaScript boots up and everything like that. So that's a nice way to just double check and say okay, if you're worried about SEO or, your crawlers or just the first time load speed, this is a good way to double check that. So yeah. And it's kind of interesting to crawl through here sometime and just see how it's all output. It'll help you understand a little bit more about your pages. You'll see some interesting things if you're not super familiar with Gatsby. Okay, so that's the gist of that and how that works. And that pretty much sums up Emotion. And just to show, the regular way that you install Emotion for React works just great for Gatsby. Okay, you don't need to do anything special or anything like that. And that's pretty cool, in my opinion. Now, if you go to the documentation for Emotion in Gatsby, you will see that they will want you to install Emotion Core, Emotion Styled, and Gatsby Plugin-Emotion. Now, if you're ever searching this, if you type Emotion, you'll see that there are a lot of repeats here. This is something I don't really like about the way that their documentation has grown, because it's open source and that's really cool, and it lends it to you can always find an answer, and too much is better than too little. But sometimes it's a little exhausting when there are multiple sources for a thing and you're trying to figure out, you got to read all of them to get every little bit of detail. It'd be nice if someone were aggregating this. I hope someone's working on that. But just know, you'll get a lot of results, and the one we're looking at right now, I will link in the description. So for this plugin, they'll want you to also install Gatsby Plugin-Emotion and add it to your config, okay? And it does kind of touch on what it is doing, but not nearly enough for me. It took me a little bit of digging. So I'm going to show you what that does and how that works, just in the spirit of the series. So what we'll do is we'll do yarn add. We'll add that plugin. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, and then we will start up our dev server once again. And while we're doing that, we'll go to our config. We will add, we can just add it right here at the top. Do I still have it? gatsby-plugin-emotion. Let's do this. Why is it doing this? So now that that's added, it should automatically reload if it was already done loading. And I can bump this down a little bit. So I'm going to hard refresh this. And actually, we are on 8,000 now because I just switched back to dev. Sorry. Cool. And now, if we look at the footer, there is... nope, still the same class, so it's not working yet. I'll restart. Maybe it didn't take... Maybe I, like... Sometimes when you're doing the config, it will... If you change it, like, in the middle of the build, it won't re-trigger it. All right. There we go. So now you can see that there is this interesting little, postfix tag here saying styled footer. It's telling you the name of your styled component. That's kind of cool, huh? So now if you look over here, this is not just linking to the CSS. If you click it, it will take you to your original code and let you inspect your original code rather than seeing the final end output all, compressed up, which you can still see by going into the head tag. This is really, really cool. This is called the source map. And that is one of the major things that I use this plugin for, is that I used to think that you needed it for server-side rendering, the gatsby-plugin-emotion, but that is not true. What it's actually doing is adding this Babel plugin, and one of the features that does is allow you to have source maps here. And that is really nice when you're troubleshooting and you just want to see, what's this code look like? Because one, it'll help you find it if you're looking for it, and you're curious. You could look for this like props.light or something like that. But it also just lets you do a quick spot check of how things are being computed. So it's great for many reasons. And it's worth just really briefly talking about like the Babel plugin itself. So if you come over to here to Emotion, you can see there is this Babel plugin. And the Babel plugin itself, I'm sorry if you are a Babel sayer and you're very upset about me saying Babel. That is how I say it. Deal with it. So minification is one of the major features. And I'm pretty sure you're already getting this out of Gatsby. I've played around with turning the plugin on and off, and it was always minified no matter what. So it talks about leading and trailing space properties. I added just a bunch of space like all over, and the end result was it was always fully minified. So I'm pretty sure that Gatsby is just doing that with its normal build pipeline anyways. So I don't think that's a benefit, but maybe I'm missing something. Dead code elimination. I know that this eliminates like the source maps because those will come along as extra code, and it will strip those out for production. But I'm not sure to what extent it also eliminates other code, because I've done some testing here as well and didn't seem to remove some of the things that I thought it would. But again, it was just a light set of testing, So these two I'm kind of like up in the air about, but the source maps for sure is a really cool feature. That's my favorite part about it. And then components as selectors. This is an interesting one. I'm not going to get too much into this, but I'll show you just really quickly how it works. So if you are in a styled component, and you can actually just export an entire styled component like so. And this is a common thing to do. So let's say we are exporting, another styled component called, styled links or something like that. Well, you can actually select that by saying styled links here if you were to import it into this file, and you can use that as a selector. So that's just a quick preview. I don't want to spend too much time on that because it's kind of out of the scope of this setup video, but just know that. And then while we're here, I might as well show that like this is a really cool thing about style components is like this is a big no-no in most people's world. Let's say we're going to change all the A tags to have the, let's do slate blue this time. It's going to look terrible, but now let's say I have a unordered list in here and it's got 5 items and each of those items has an A tag, and we don't care about that. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. Yeah. And go back over here. Well, that just looks like purple, so maybe I should change that to a tag. Let's make it red. Text decoration none. And that should be working. It's under footer. Oh, that'll get me. I was wondering why I wasn't highlighting it. So you got to have semicolons at the end. That's very important. Sometimes that gets you. Okay. Woo! So now you can see all of my links and they're styled there. And like I was saying before, this is like, you typically would not ever want to, in any project that's going to grow, directly target an element. It's a no-no in a lot of situations because it seems like it'll be okay, but eventually you'll have some sort of specificity issue and you're going to run into a conflict and it's going to be hard to troubleshoot. So you usually just want to stay away from it and use like direct classes. But this is really neat because the way that style components work is they always come up with this unique identifier. And so within that, if you look at the A tag style here, it says that it uses that whole unique identifier and then has the A tag. So you can do the same thing with class names. Now, you don't have to have a silly, let's say, all of these list items per se, or maybe this whole thing. This normally you would, if you're a crazy nutcase like me, you use like BEM, and you'd have a footer class above this, and so this would be like footer __ links column or something like that. Now you can just ditch any sort of naming conventions or ways that you're trying to get around specificity and just use really simple generic names in the scope of the component, because in this component itself, whenever you use that in this links column, it's going to be nested under that identifier. So there's not going to be a name collision. You don't have to worry about it. You can just, you can use link or, short words or whatever. I can't think of any right now, but it frees you up to not have to think about names nearly as much, and you have these locally scoped names to the component. And that's what's kind of cool about styled components, is that they give you this interesting kind of encapsulation where you can imagine you could just put this in a file, this footer, and export it with all its styles and everything like that, and hand it off to any React library or anything like that, and it'll just work. It has everything included. They don't need to have a separate CSS sheet that they import and hook up and all that stuff. Not that that's a big deal, but it's kind of cool to have this modular idea. And then everything about the styles are also in this file. So instead of inspecting, because what most people's instincts are and why they originally don't like style components is that, or I shouldn't speak for everyone, but this is what I've encountered a lot in my experience, is that they'll come here and they'll see this identifier and they'll be like, how am I supposed to find this in my CSS? I want to go search for, the styled footer class or whatever, but it doesn't exist. It's just this hash that's made up or identifier that's made up. And you kind of just have to get around that way of thinking. What you want to do is think about it in terms of like, okay, well, this is the footer, and you could look it up in your, React Dev Tools if you've got that installed and all that. But this is the footer, and I know that, everything concerning the footer should be in the footer component. And so you could just go straight to the footer component, and your styles are here, co-located, whatever fancy terminology you want to use, and you can find your answer that way, rather than going to a style sheet and looking for a specific name that, where a bunch of other styles are. There's nothing wrong with that. I like both ways, honestly. There are pros and cons either way. It's just the way the world is. But style components got some pretty cool stuff going on. So hopefully we can wrap this up now, and that all makes sense to you of what did you need to install. Well, all you needed to do was to go to this section in emotion docs, where if you want to do styled, you can do emotion styled and emotion core. Otherwise, you could just install emotion core if you're a fan of just the CSS prop way. That's really up to you. Oh, they're using class name for theirs. That's interesting. Not the CSS prop. This one lets you use the CSS prop with the pragma. Okay. So there's that. And then if you want these extra sweet little features for the Babel plugin to be set up, you might be getting more things that I just said. Just throw that in there. The coolest one to me really is the the source maps here. Just being able to click that and go, boom, that's awesome. And that's really all you need to set up Emotion and get going. And I recommend just trying it out and seeing how you like it. The other styled component libraries are also fantastic. Styled components itself. I haven't really used Glamour since it originally came out, but there's some other ones. There's a new one called Stitches that seems pretty cool. Everyone's kind of trying to take a stab at this, and it's an evolving ecosystem. But when you learn one, it makes it so much easier to jump to the next. I mean, honestly, between styled components and Emotion, they're mostly interchangeable. So I think it's worth trying, and there's a lot of cool benefits to it. And hopefully this video was informative enough to get you started on that path. Ooh, we actually didn't get... Oh, hello. Oh, I'm sorry. You just need so much attention, don't you? This probably looks pretty funny from your angle. Let's see if we can get her to focus. Look at that. Look at that. No, it won't focus on her. There we go. Look at that beauty. Thank you. Get out of here.